The wind was screaming across the high mountains when Arland Hayes saw it, an SUV losing control, flipping once, then twice, and finally disappearing into a wall of white. The snow was so thick it looked like the whole world had swallowed the car. For a moment Arland couldn't move. His breath caught in his chest. A terrible memory flashed before his eyes. Another crash years ago, the one that took his wife's life. Then his heart made the choice his mind couldn't. He ran. Even though the blizzard was wild and the wind cut like knives, even though his boots kept sinking deep into the snow, he ran. He didn't know if anyone in that SUV was alive, but he knew what it felt like to wait for help that never came. And he refused to let another person die alone in the cold. Arland reached the wreck just as the snow began to bury it. The windows were shattered, the doors bent and twisted. The pale daylight was fading fast. He pulled at one of the doors with all his strength until it opened with a painful crack. Inside was a woman, slumped over the steering wheel, barely conscious. Her breath came in small, weak clouds. Later he would learn her name, Mara Lennox, the strong and famous CEO of a global company, Linux Dynamics. She was a woman used to offices, meetings, and city skylines, not frozen mountain roads. But right now she was none of those things. She was cold, pale, and shaking all over. Her hair was wet with melting snow and a small cut on her forehead was bleeding slowly. Arland didn't waste a second. He lifted her gently into his arms. She felt so light. Too light for a woman who carried such a powerful reputation. Her lips moved like she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. The snowstorm was growing worse. He could barely see 3 feet ahead. He knew he couldn't carry her down the mountain safely. Not in this weather. Not while she was slipping toward hypothermia. So he turned toward the only place he could think of, an old logging cabin, abandoned years ago, hidden among frost-covered pine trees. He had used it once long ago when he was hiking with his 8-year-old son, Rowan. He prayed it still stood. By some miracle it did. The roof sagged, the hinges groaned as he pushed the door open, but it was still standing. He laid Mara down on a pile of old quilts. There was no fireplace. Only a small metal stove that smoked if you looked at it wrong. Still, Arland managed to light a small fire. Slowly, the room began to warm. The cold didn't leave, but it softened just enough to let them breathe. When Mara opened her eyes, she looked lost. Her breath was shaky, her voice barely a whisper as she tried to understand where she was. Arland offered her water and checked her pulse. Relieved to find it steady, he smiled softly. Her elegant red dress, perfect for meetings but not for mountains, was still wet at the hem. She tried to hide her shivers, wrapping her arms around herself, but he could see them. Without a word, Arland draped a thick, rough blanket over her shoulders. It smelled of dust and age, but she held it close like it was the last bit of warmth left in the world. As the fire flickered, her eyes changed. They were no longer the sharp eyes of a business leader, just tired, human eyes full of fear and exhaustion. The afternoon faded into early evening. Outside, the storm kept roaring, the light turning pale and colorless. Sometimes the harshest storms happen in the middle of the day. Mara tried to sit up, but her body was weak. She winced, her breath trembling. Arland moved closer, ready to help if she fell. For the first time, she looked at him. Really looked. Seeing not just his worn clothes and tired face, but the quiet strength of a man who had saved her life. Then, in a soft, trembling voice, she whispered, "Can I slip under your blanket?" Her voice wasn't flirtatious. It was frightened, deeply human. Arland hesitated, not because he misunderstood, but because he remembered the cold hospital room where his wife had died. He had promised himself to protect people, not to cross lines, but this wasn't a line. This was survival. The cold didn't care about class or pride. It only cared about life and death. So he nodded gently and lifted the blanket. Mara leaned against him, her shoulder trembling against his chest. He could feel her shallow breaths. The warmth between them grew slowly. First awkward, then necessary, then strangely comforting. She smelled faintly of snow and expensive perfume, but underneath was something raw, something real. For the first time in years, Arland felt another person rest against him, not out of desire or duty, but simple trust. Mara stayed silent for a long time, listening to the storm and the steady beat of his heart. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, heavy with truth. "I'm not used to kindness without a price," she said. She admitted she hadn't taken a single real day off in 8 years. Not since her father died and she had taken over the company that slowly turned her into someone she barely recognized. She didn't cry, but her eyes held the weight of many years of loneliness. Arlen didn't try to comfort her with big words. He simply spoke about his son, Rowan, about how they lived quietly now, learning to find peace in small things. He told her how grief had taught him patience and humility, and how helping others gave his pain a purpose. Outside, the storm screamed. But inside the cabin, something gentle began to grow. Two frozen souls started to thaw, not from the fire but from understanding. Hours passed. The storm still shone bright, but time seemed to stop. Mara's breathing grew steadier. Her color returned. Her head rested against Arlen's shoulder, her heart calm and sure. He adjusted the blanket and she whispered a small, quiet, "Thank you," that sounded like her soul exhaling. When the blizzard finally began to fade, Arlen went outside and fired an emergency flare into the gray sky. The red light rose like a promise. Within an hour, a rescue team arrived. Mara was taken to a nearby medical station. Arlen followed quietly, making sure she was safe. He thought their paths would part once she returned to her world of glass towers and power. But he was wrong. The next day, when the sunlight was soft and the storm had passed, Mara came to find him. She still looked like a CEO, but her eyes had changed. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't just save my life. You gave me something I'd forgotten. Safety without conditions." She paused, then smiled gently. "May I meet your son?" Arlen nodded, a quiet warmth in his heart. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing. Something real had been born in that cabin. Not romance, not promises, just truth. Truth, kindness, and the fragile bridge that sometimes forms between two broken human hearts. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal, because the world still needs reminders of what compassion truly means. And tell us, would you help a stranger in a storm?